All right, good morning and welcome to Camp Yarnsie. This morning we have Sheila Bosworth and Jonathan Bosworth who are going to be talking about woods with a story and telling us all about those woods and how they make their spindles. Turn it over to them.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Jonathan.
Good morning.
So today we're going to talk about some of the unusual woods that we use to make spindles. And I've got pictures of them, and we'll talk about their age and where they came from. And then we also have pictures of the finished spindles so you can see what they look like. After about a half hour, Jonathan's going to take over and talk about characteristics of wood. I jokingly call this Burls, Bugs, and Brew. He'll explain what that's all about. So anyway, the oldest wood that we work with is kauri, Kauri, which is an ancient wood. It's over 5,000 years old.
30,000.
30, well, that's definitely old. 30,000 years old.
There was some sort of a geological event in New Zealand, and these kauri trees got buried in an oxygen-free atmosphere, and they've been recently dug up.
Yeah.
And the wood has been dated to be 30,000 years old.
It's amazing.
So that's the oldest wood we use.
It's very, very light in weight and density. So
it's a conifer.
Yeah, but I don't have anything of that to show you today, but I do have some lightweight, featherweight kauris on our website if you want to know more about them, want to see what's there. So the first picture that you're going to look at, I'm resuming share. Okay, I hope you see something that's very barky across the middle of the page and a little bit stripy on the lower half of the page. That's bog oak. And this is oak trees from several thousand years ago, not as old as the kauri, but more like 4,000 to 7,000 years old, that fell during that time into a bog or a swamp or some damp and wet place, and the water passing over it has changed the color because of the minerals and other chemicals in the water that occur naturally.
Yeah.
So this is what the bog oak looks like.
Sheila, I apologize for interrupting you. Is there something blocking the picture? We only see a quarter of the picture.
Yeah, I can't see.
No, there's nothing blocking the photo. Okay, this is where I'm going to say I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do now. This is a picture of bog oak. Is it better now?
I can't see anything.
Yeah, it's only the top quarter we see.
Yeah, otherwise it's blue.
Can you make it larger?
Make it larger, like huge. Okay.
The full screen. Is it minimized or what do you call it? Small?
No, it's a smaller picture. This is I'm not sure how to do this. Hang on one second.
Okay.
It says maximize floating view. Is that what I want?
Yes, try that. That sounds about right.
Oh, nope, not that. Okay. Lindsay, can you help me out with this?
Did you pull the picture up from the bottom? Is it minimized on the bottom of your screen?
Just a second. There. Can you see now?
Still only the
The picture ends at that line.
The picture ends at a line across the bottom where it looks more brown than black. Let me
I only see like the corner head of it, like the
You see it now.
The whorl. I don't see the actual hook or any of that.
Oh, you're looking at the spindle. Okay, I'm wanting you to look at bog oak. Let's try this again. Stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to open this picture one more time.
That was just a preview, just a sneak peek.
A sneak peek, yeah, right. Okay, here we go. Now let's share my screen again. Okay. Okay, do you see the same picture?
Yes. All right, that makes more sense in a way.
Okay. So
I
now
see all of your. There you go. Make that one bigger, full screen.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
It's not. Can you hear me now? Can you see me now?
If you make it the full size of your screen, because I can see the rest of your
the rest of the photos. Okay, can you see it? Okay,
yes.
Good.
Is everyone
Thank
good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this crusty looking area at the top is the bark of the bog oak, and then the wood is down here. I know.
Sawed, yeah.
Yeah, where you can see that we've already sawed some of it. Okay, I'm going to close this picture and open up the next one, which is bog oak. Nope, that's it. Not that one. This one. And here are some finished spindles in Bog Oak. See it? Can you see that? It says Ancient
Yes.
Bog Oak, Featherweight, Skinny Midi, and Mini.
Perfect.
So you can see the various thicknesses or thinnesses, if you like that word better, of the whorls. You can also see the red dots on there are the light overhead. I'm sorry about that, but you can see the oaky grain in the pictures very clearly. And some of the bog oaks are blacker than others. We have bog oak from several different places, and the density of color varies depending on what the water content was in the places that they were in. Most people think of it as being very black, but some of the Bavarian bog oak that we have, the southern German bog oak that we have, is black to very, very dark brown. So you can see different things on it. Okay, so that's bog oak. It's old, it's wonderful, and it's a medium weight wood. Okay, so I'm going to close that picture. And the next picture I have is of the Clearwater. How many have heard of Pete Seeger, the famous folk singer? Pete Seeger was very active environmentally in helping people to clean up the Hudson River. And he wanted them to make the water safe and clean so everybody could use it, not only for sailing, but also for swimming. And so he had a ship built, a sloop it's called, and he named it Clearwater. And so about every 3 or 4 years, about 1/3 to 1/4 to 1/3 of the ship is restored. Thank you, Jonathan. My brain was frozen. I guess I didn't have enough coffee there. The ship is restored, and a customer of ours in Finland told us that there was a restoration work scheduled, and they were offering to give, the Clearwater Foundation was offering to give you pieces of the wood taken out in the restoration if you wanted to make something out of it. So obviously we called them right away. And we were able to go and visit and get a tour of the restoration work, which was so very interesting. So you see here in this photo 2 pieces of the white oak that Pete's sloop, the Clearwater, was made from, with the nails that are holding it in place. They're pretty fierce, those nails, and pretty big. But we're able to use that wood to make shuttles, to make spindles in all 4 sizes. And it's really wonderful to know that Pete Seeger's Clearwater sloop is not only making the water in the Hudson River clear, but also making joy for spinners. And here is a Clearwater featherweight. Okay, let's make that big. Now, one of the interesting things about the old woods that we used is oftentimes you can see there are holes, interesting marks where nails or screws may have been, or where some bug got in and made a happy little nest for itself there. Again, this is oak, and if you are familiar with oak and you look on the side, I can't point with my finger because you can't see it, but I hope you can see my cursor. If you look on the side over here, you can see a little bit of the cross hatching that is familiar with oak, as well as over here. So the background of this is really quite wonderful. If you are a child of the 50s and 60s, then this wood has some memories for you. Okay. So that's Clearwater oak and bog oak. That's 2 of the oaks that we've made. Now I'm going to talk about heart pine. A customer of ours from Pamplin, Virginia, bought a 250-year-old farm. It was a King George III, I think, land grant farm. King George III is the guy who we fought off in the American Revolution. And on her farm, built probably in the middle of the 19th century, not so much the 18th century, but we don't know when it was built for sure, was a summer kitchen. We believe it was a summer kitchen. It was a small cabin area that was built right next to the house. Summer kitchens were oftentimes built in the 17th and 18th and even early 19th century so that you could have a roaring fire in the kitchen in your house in the summertime and not burn your house down. So the kitchen was a separate area. So this is heart pine, which is common to that area of Virginia. And you can see the heart wood in it here. I hope you can see my cursor moving on that. sort of peachy colored thing. You can see the nail holes here and here, and you can see where the wood has been eaten away over here. So this is really interesting. Jonathan has to do a little cosmetic surgery on this wood to make it turnable. And we always say in the listings for this wood that the wood is distressed. That means it's been eaten by bugs and got nail holes in it and had some cosmetic work done, so it doesn't look picture perfect. But you get to spin with history in your hand. And especially if you're from Virginia or the states around Virginia, this is a part of your heritage. It's a part of everybody's heritage. I love the colors, and you can see how the grain lines here get wider. The tree was growing not so fast up here, but it was growing really faster down here, probably when it was younger, just like us. So that's heart pine. Heart pine cabin is what the tags on the spindles say. And here's another picture of it, which demonstrates basically the condition that some of the wood is in. Jonathan, is that bugs that eat that away, or
That's
is
some
that
kind of a beetle, yes.
some kind of a beetle that eats the wood?
And leaves behind its refuse.
Yes. So you can see the tracks, and this must have been a little happy bug home up here, and less bug work down here, but this must have been a colony, a Virginia colony.
Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving for them.
Thanksgiving holiday, right, for all the bugs. But you can see why Jonathan does have to do some cosmetic work. And we also do have to be careful about where we cut, because I don't want to place the blank for the whorl directly over all of this cosmetic mess. Okay, so now here we have two heart pine spindles, a standard midi and a skinny midi. Trying to move this over here. There, come on. Over. It doesn't seem to want it. There we go.
Those are beautiful.
Aren't they beautiful? Now here you can really see what we've had to do to make these workable. Over here you see that some of those dusty spots have been filled in. Here's one that may be a nail hole or the edge of where a nail hole was that is not filled in. And over here you can see that that Jonathan didn't fill everything in. So that's why we say this wood is distressed. Like wood that's been left out in the wild for a long time. It's not, and here's another little hole over here. I hope you see that one. If you look inside the whorl, you see right here where I'm circling, there's a peekaboo hole there. So there's a hole right through the bottom. You can see on this side over here that it's much darker in color. This is the thing that we like about working with old woods, is that the colors and the grains always look different, and they often look very different from what you see in these woods today. So I'm going to close this picture now. Again, this is a skinny midi and a regular midi in heart pine cabin wood. And here I'm going to skip the Hosmer House for right now and go to the summer kitchen, which is another wood from the same building. So it had heart pine rafters. Thank you, Jonathan.
And log cabin walls.
And
outer walls.
Chestnut oak, another tree popular or resident in Virginia. Chestnut oak walls. So here's a crosscut of what the wood looks like. It's pretty, you can see the circular grain here, and you can see across the top how it is weathered. I think this was the outside, or maybe it was the inside. I don't know. This end is much tighter and much cleaner, but this end is really a mess, so we have to avoid that. Summer kitchen. And here's what it looks like now we wrote cabin on it so we would not confuse it. Oops, does that show, or is that too tiny? So we would not confuse it with another wood. But you can see how these are like rough hewn logs. This is a peg hole. I don't think it's a nail hole. It's definitely a peg, because this piece is probably a foot wide or perhaps a little more. You can see the cracks in the wood, and you can see how a little bit of it here is peeling. So we do have to do some cosmetic work on this as well before we can turn it. And I want to show you now what the cabin looked like. Kitchen and pine. Here's a teeny picture, and I'm going to make it really big now. Is that visible to everybody?
Yes, we can see it.
So you can see that it's, I guess the nicest thing to say would be tired. It has since been destroyed because over the years, the weather, the use, wear and tear, and other things have really taken it apart. It has a stone foundation. You see windows here, and here are the oak beams that you see. So this is from Pamplin, Virginia, and it was the Elam family, E-L-A-M, who were big in Pamplin, Virginia. All right, so next I'm going on to another historic house. I'll show you the house itself. This is the Hosmer House. Hosmer family was a big colonial New England family. Do you see this now? It looks like your normal New England old house. This is the only house I know in New England that has its own Wikipedia entry. So if you go to Wikipedia and enter Hosmer Homestead, you'll find this photo and some information about this. The woman who owns this house is a spinner, and she's very involved in restoration of old and tired spinning wheels. And when they had some work done in the basement of their house where the beam was, they had to take part of the beam out and replace it with something more modern and not droopy. But she knew that we made spindles out of interesting woods, and so she offered us a piece of the beam and said, would you like to make some spindles and one for me out of this? So we said, sure, let's do that. So here comes Hosmer Homestead. This is what it looks like. You can see that this was cut to make another piece fit in here. We wrote Hosmer on it, so we didn't confuse it with something else. We do write on all our wood, so we know what it is. And shame on me when I forget to do that, because then I have to chase after Jonathan and say, what do you think this is? What do you think this is? I have no idea what this is.
And the answer was damn fino.
Yeah, damn fino. Jonathan's father made a lot of things out of damn fino. Somebody actually bought a shuttle made out of damn fino, which is actually damned fino. Damn fino. She bought a shuttle, and she loves it, and I'm very happy for her. But several people said, "What is that wood?" Damn fino. Okay, so there's the beam. You can see it's quite old, and it's been there for 200 and some years. The house was built in 210. 710. 210. Oh, that's hardly worth worrying about.
Oh dear.
I better have some more coffee. Okay, and here are two of the spindles. Can you see these? Made from Hosmer House. We call this Colonial Concord. Now, if you can just bring back to mind the heart pine, these are both pine beams that were used, rafters and beams that were used. So they are the same tree, like chocolate bars are all the same chocolate, but they're different varieties.
Different species.
Yeah, different species. We don't know exactly what species this was, and Kristen didn't have any documentation to say anything about what it was. So we just say Colonial Concord because it's from a house right down the street from us. Okay, so that's history. Okay, the next one coming up, Navy surplus. Navy surplus is an interesting story, and it's also a local, well, not really local to us, but it ended up being local to us. Can you see this? It looks like there's 1790 written across here, but we don't know if that really is 1790 or not. And it looks like ST, and we don't know what that means, but we think it was an entry in a log book. This is live oak, another kind of oak that was brought up from South Carolina, probably in the late 18th century. Live oak was used for beams and keels in sailing ships. This is from the Charlestown Navy Shipyard in the greater Boston area. It was stored in a soaking pond. A soaking pond is like a trench dug out near the shore or near a river where water comes in, and they keep the log trunks in the soaking pond to keep them wet so that it's easy to repair a ship that comes in and needs some water exposed parts to be replaced or repaired. This is already wet. It's not going to get any wetter when it's in the ocean, so it's good to go. So the story behind these is that the soaking ponds surrounding the Charlestown Navy shipyard gradually were not used because they stopped making ships out of wood. And then the ponds dried up and were filled in, and things were built on them. One of the things built on them was Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital, which is a great hospital in downtown Boston for people who are recovering from surgery, from traumatic wounds, from all kinds of things. So they decided one day they wanted to redo their parking lot. So they dug up their parking lot, and look what they found. They found several of these trunks in what was a soaking pond. A friend of ours who was involved in excavating, digging them out and bringing them up, knows that we're always interested in interesting woods. And so he asked if we would like some. And we said yes right away. So we call this Navy surplus because it's left over from the Navy Yard. So if you're wondering how we come up with names for things, I couldn't begin to tell you, but that's the one that we use. So this is Navy surplus. We do think that this is close to 1790. We don't know exactly. And as I said, the logbook where this might have been kept is no longer extant. So this would have been something used about the time of the Constitution. Those of you who've had our spindles for a long time may remember that we made spindles from the USS New Hampshire, which was a sister ship to the Constitution. The USS New Hampshire wasn't actually made until about 30 years after the Revolutionary War. And when it was commissioned, it was sent to Africa to fight the Barbary pirates. Excuse me, Barbary pirates. And then it came back and was used during the Civil War for taking supplies here and there, up and down the coastline for the United States. And then it was decommissioned and left in a dock area in New York where it burned down. And so it was taken as salvage, hooked up to a sailing ship, a stronger tanker sort of thing, and drawn up the Atlantic, going up to either Maine or perhaps to Canada. And at Graves Island, which is just off the coast of Massachusetts, up in the North Shore area, there was a thunderous storm, and the wreck of the ship caught on fire again, and it was cut off from the ship that was hauling it, and it sank. So we were able to get some of that wood when it was reclaimed, and we made spindles out of that called shipwreck spindles. More Navy oak. We like the Navy and ships in general because they provide us a lot of interesting wood. The last, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you these before. Here are some summer kitchen mini and midi. These are the chestnut oak whorls. Okay. I love the color. They're so much lighter than the Clearwater or the other oaks that we use. And then here are photos of the Navy surplus. And you can see again, this is live oak. You can see over here the great markings that this wood has. And again, this is a little bit distressed over here. You can see that there are some repaired dings in this, but they're stable and they're safe to use. Navy surplus, the live oak, is very dense and heavy, so that's why we try to make them thinner.
Can I ask a question really quickly? Joel asked, did you trim off the carving and keep it as a slab?
It was a slab, or
I would call it a beam. It was about a foot square and 20 feet long. What was in the soaking pond, and we have, and that with a number on it was the end off of one of the beams. It's terrible stuff to cut.
Yeah, we didn't cut it off. It's still there. We still have it intact with the writing on it.
Oh, okay. That's why I was wondering, because even if you're going to use the rest of the beam, it would be fun to cut off that end piece.
We saved that exactly for that purpose.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit of history there, Joel. Nice to see you.
Great. Even though the notebook has disappeared, we still got the
data.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
We did actually go to the Charlestown Navy Shipyard and meet up with some people in their historical records to explain what we had. We had photos of it, but they said any records we have of that have, they're gone, they're history.
Yeah. Yep.
They're ancient history.
Yep.
So the last spindle I want to show you today is what we call temple teak. And this is wood from a Buddhist temple in northern India that was downed by an earthquake. Here's Jonathan holding it. And we know it was painted. You can see the paint along here. And then the other thing that you can see, that's Jonathan in the shop, is the pieces that were marked out so you could see how it was held together. Can you see that there's a big chunk missing on either end of this? But you can see the color of the wood here. It still looks like something was painted across here. We don't know. Some woman who lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the People's Republic of Cambridge, had this wood brought back to the United States and had it turned into flooring for her kitchen. The company that did the planks from this for her kitchen is another wood dealer that we know who knows that we like interesting things, woods with a story, and so we got some from him. And here are the teaks before oiling, once they've been turned into whorls. And I have to say, this picture makes me think, because of the color of the wood and the grain that you can see, this makes me think of the terracotta warriors in the Chinese tombs in Xi'an. I think that's the name of the city that it's in. They're all stacked up here. Jonathan has turned them and sanded them, and I think he's about to notch them. They haven't been notched yet. We put a notch in the back of all of our spindles. But this is really beautiful. And then here it is, having been oiled with a little Buddha. The Buddha did not do the oiling. We did. Jonathan did the oiling. How much more beautiful this looks with the oil. And it's so rich in color and really quite beautiful. You can see over here this nice grain mark that goes here. Here, these lovely diagonal ends. So we call these temple teak. And as you might know, in the Buddhist temples, the monks had prayer wheels that they would turn to pray incessantly. So when you're spinning with your temple teak spindle, we like to think that you're spinning for peace. And here are the two teak minis, temple teak minis. I chose the one on the left because it has a beautiful little slice on it. I'm trying to get this all the way across. Can you see this here? Isn't that beautiful? And you can see the nice wavy grain here on these. So these are some of the woods that have unusual and interesting backgrounds that we make into spindles. Everybody loves a good story, and we love a good wood story. So these are some of our spindles with a story, woods with a story. So if anyone has questions, please ask. I'm happy to answer them. And I'm going to stop sharing. And if there are no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. Jonathan, you're going to talk about
bugs.
Burls, bugs, and brew.
That was Sheila's.
That was my name for it.
Well, I'm going to start off with the easy one, the brew. So, where am I?
You're in there, right there.
Oh,
they're seeing you in full life.
This is the label. Jack Daniels, of course, you know, is a big whiskey company, and they make their barrels out of white oak, and then they seal. This is a piece of a barrel. The inside of the barrel is charcoal as part of the process, and then the whiskey ages in here for X number of years. So this is a stave from a whiskey barrel that we use, and I take the.
Oh yes, it is. It smells like whiskey.
You still smell. I stable the bottom of the whorl is the charcoal side of the beam. I seal it so it's sealed and you'll never get in your yarn. And we take these beams and make them into drop spindles. So
yeah,
this is the brew part.
That's our moonshine spindles.
The moonshine spindles.
Thank you, Jack Daniels.
These barrels by law cannot be reused for whiskey in the States, but winemakers and whiskey makers in Europe take some of these barrels and reuse them. So we get the ones that can't be refilled by law in the States. So,
yeah.
But anyhow, to get out, when I started getting ready for this day, I looked at a couple of my favorite books, they started off by reminding me wood comes from trees, in case we forget.
There you go.
So we'll go on next to burls. A burl is a unusual growth on a tree. So here it sticks out it's on the outside of the tree. Here is a piece of, you can see, photography is bad, but you can see the bumps on the outside of the tree. It's a very cancerous growth, unnatural growth that happens on a tree. It's a burl, it's a bump on the outside. This is one piece. This is a maple burl from locally.
Oops, sorry.
And it's you can see that the one theory is it was a bud that went bad, so to speak. And this here was where it was attached to the tree. So you can see this was a little bit of a bump, and then this great big burl, spherical burl grow from this little bump. So it's some sort of a abnormal growth to a tree instead of the straight longitudinal beam of a tree that one usually sees.
But they're beautiful.
They're beautiful.
And they're beautiful to work with.
And you can sometimes see little, what might be called budlets, or where the buds went wild. So this is an abnormal growth. And I like to think that it's a product of one of the fungi that grows in the soil around the roots, that some of the fungal devices got up into the tree and caused it to grow strangely. This is my theory about what bird's eye maple is. It's no biologist has either agreed with me or not, but they all say that's a good idea.
That's possible.
That's possible. So I'm sticking with my theory that bird's eye maple is a result of some of the fungi that grow. There are lots of mycelium, however you pronounce it, that grow in the forest between trees that feed the tree and are fed by the tree. And there is a communication of sorts between the fungi and the tree roots. So that's a growing study right now. So what is all this going on in the ground? It's not just a tree by itself. So that's one kind of burl. I'll put this back on the shelf here. There's another kind of burl, what is it? Thoya. This is a thoya, piece of a thoya burl. I don't know. It's a very there is no grain. It's just this wonderful pattern in it. Now, this grows in
underground,
but in North
Africa.
North Africa, it grows underground on some kind of a pine tree. I like to think of it as the pine tree version of a potato. It's a large area of nutrition that the tree stores underground to feed it when it doesn't rain for years. So these things come up to, I've seen them 2-3 feet in diameter. They get very big. And this is a piece of it that we have.
Looks like a fish.
This looks like a fish, but you can see that it's, we have yet to figure out how to really do this and get it so it shows.
There,
but
that's good.
you can see this pattern is really beautiful in the various colored swirls. So this is a burl that's not growing on a tree, but it grows underground.
It has a very strong scent too, like incense.
It does. Some people burn it for incense.
Yeah, it has a very, very strong
Very
scent.
strong smell.
Okay.
So that takes care of
Burls.
Okay. Now
let's talk about bugs.
No, bugs. No. You saw in some of the pine beam from Virginia or wherever it was that other creatures have used this wood before we got it. So we're sort of used wood, so to speak.
We're the third round.
Third round at least. Now one creature that uses some kind of wood is the Ambrosia Beetle. And in its larval form, in one of its many states, it goes into the heart of a tree. And then box elder and swamp maple are two trees that you find this in. And this is a piece of flame box elder. Again, it's very bad. But this shows two things. It shows the red color. On box elder, it's red. In swamp maple, it's brown stripes. But anyhow, so this
along here.
So this shows something else, which is also bugs. Some of these other funguses, nicely called white mold, gets into the wood and makes it lighter color. It eats the wood. I mean, it uses the wood for a food source. And various pieces of the fungi have zones. This doesn't show too well, but there are zone lines of thin black lines and white spots on either side. And this is sort of the boundary area between two different patches of fungi that have been eating the wood. So they have the zonal boundaries, which is these thin black lines. There's one up around there, I think.
Yeah, and there's one along here.
So some woods
down in here.
Some woods really show
And
beautifully these lines.
Do you see it here?
But this wood is on its way to becoming, the fungi are what take the trees back to the basic material so it can grow another tree. And we just try to use the wood and arrest it before it goes bad. Sometimes you get some beautiful patterns of these black zonal boundaries.
Spalted maple.
Spalted maple, for example. Do we have a piece of?
No, I don't have it, but ambrosia maple is
Ambrosia, though that's the enzyme from the
Ambrosia beetle.
But the black line from the mold, there are many molds. In fact, there's a whole book, one of my favorite books, called Spalted Woods. And here you can definitely see very clearly the black lines.
Yeah, see them in here?
The zonal boundaries between the white mold.
Really nice one on the back page.
Yeah,
too.
and this is Sheila can hold the book so you can see it better. There's a whole growing interest in this. Of course, they've been using spalted woods since as far back as we have woods that we know of, but they're becoming a great interest in science, and they're studying the various. This book has a place where you can go to get various molds to spalt your own wood.
No thanks.
But they're also using the spalting technique, it turns out, for dyeing fiber. So not only do you have the chemical dyeing of fibers, but now they're experimenting with dyeing fibers using spalting molds. We'll see where that goes. This book was printed 5 years ago, so it's 5 years behind where we are right now. But
yeah.
Spalting it gives us fortunately for the spinners, when the wood dries out, the molds become dormant and we stabilize it so that any spindle you get, no more molding, eating will happen. So we often love to have these woods. Sometimes you can get, we have some logs firewood that we split open and find that spalting has gotten in there when the wood is still wet.
Yeah.
In fact, here is we're having an instance of the ash. There are two things that are killing our ash tree. The ash borer, which deals with the bark and kills the tree by starving it to death. And then there's a mold that gets in it. And we have here is a shuttle that's made from some of this ash. Ash is usually a very light white wood. But here you can see the mold as it grows up. The fibers of the tree have made it darker and has added color as it does its thing. Now, we stop the molding when it happens, but we find there's some very beautiful pieces of firewood, so to speak, that we have rescued. Or in this case, the tree was cut down because it was dead, and we were able to make shuttles out of it, showing the effect of somebody else there first.
Yes, we got the secondhand beauty of the wood.
So you get to see the beauty of the wood in the first place and what has happened to the wood as the various other molds and things get into the wood. So
I think you've covered most of them now.
I've pretty well covered what can happen to a tree after it grows up and other fortunately for us, if it wasn't for the fungi that take the tree back to its basic materials, we would be buried by trees that have.
Yeah.
So it's good and it's bad. It makes a beautiful piece of wood that we stabilize, and we have to mention everything we make we guarantee for life. If something happens to it, the stabilizing falters or the wood cracks, we will replace it anytime after you've got it. And that's another interesting problem with wood is that often as it grows with stress within the fibers. So when you cut a tree and change the pattern, the wood can warp.
Yeah.
So we will also, any shafts or anything that go bad, we will replace that. Which reminds me of a previous lifestyle when I made Burl Oak oboes. The best wood for using those was English boxwood. And boxwood that we got then was boxwood from estates that had been cut down to convert to flats or something. So we got the trees from the estates. And boxwood never goes straight, and so all boxwood, by definition, is very stressed.
Yes.
So if you go to your museum and look in the collection of old oboes, you will find that some of the oboes you thought were straight when they were made are now curved, which was a curse to me as I made these things. But I recognize that this can happen, and we stand behind everything we make to replace anything that happens that's beyond our control.
Right.
So
I have a beautiful tenor recorder from Alec Loretto's shop in Australia that instead of being straight up and down like recorders should be, has a nice kind of curve. Makes me think of those cor anglais, the English horns from the 18th century that are curved.
Maybe that's how they got curved. Maybe it was such a warped piece of wood that started out straight and ended up curved.
Maybe
I
so.
doubt it, but
I doubt it too.
because the kacha that I made, I had to make them curved because
Yeah.
I couldn't warp it fast enough.
Yep.
But anyhow, this is what can happen to a tree, and between the spalting and the various fungi and just stresses that happen, and things like the burls, either as a growth on the tree or as a thoya burl, which is underground, I think, food source.
Yeah.
So that's what can happen to the tree, and we love to find these strange, unusual pieces of wood. But that reminds me, we could talk about walnut, though.
Claro walnut.
Claro
yes.
walnut is the walnuts that we eat are soft-shelled walnuts, which I think come from the Claro walnut tree, which grows on the west coast. But they're not very healthy there, so the upper part of the tree is grafted to another kind of walnut. And the part we use is the area where the grafting occurs, and it has, as a result of the two pieces of wood coming together, some very unique and wonderful
patterning
growth patterns in the wood. And so we look for the woods with the greatest pattern, and it's called Claro walnut, but it's the part of the bark tree where it was grafted together. The upper part of the tree is just a straight, boring tree, more or less, but the really interesting part is the grafting area where these two kinds of wood met and their grains
collide.
Like the white mold that has the zonal boundaries for the various aggression areas, I guess is one word they use in the book, where get the black line, sort of the foreline of the war. I mean, trees have been doing this for a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
War boundaries. But what else can I say?
I don't know. What else do you want to say? You haven't talked about moose antler.
Oh, we do use some things other than wood sometimes. We've found a very good way to make a very nice drop spindle from moose antler. Now, we don't hurt any moose to get this. For those that are wondering, in the fall, when the moose is done doing moosey things, he drops these antlers, so he doesn't have to carry them through the woods in the winter. So we go up to where they yard, which is the area where the moose get together for the winter. And then we have a friend up in northern Maine, right on the Canadian border, whose backyard
is a yard.
is a yard, a moose yard. So he goes out in the spring before the raspberries bud, and the ground is still brown, and picks up the antlers that have fallen off. and shares them with us. We use the very butt, the first 4 inches from the head, and he uses the rest for artwork and also for dog chews. It seems there's a great market in this area for moose antler chunks for your dog to chew on. So we use the whole antler between he and I. He uses the outer parts for making sculptures and other works of art and doggy chews, and we use the butt to make spindles. We've also made a few out of elk, and I have made some out of woolly mammoth tusks and teeth. But that's hard to sell because in some states now, they've, along with declaring elephant and rhino endangered, walrus is enough. They've declared woolly mammoth in the same endangered species.
Unfortunately, they're extinct. They're not endangered.
But
that's okay. Sometimes
they're in the same paragraph with endangered species. So some states, and I don't know which ones they are, we cannot sell the woolly mammoth tusk spindles because they're endangered.
Right.
It's true. It's hard to tell the ivory apart, but the grain is different in a elephant tusk and a mammoth tusk. The grain is different. If you're a connoisseur of ivory, one can tell the difference.
It's like a spinner knows the difference between merino and BFL. So,
We've also, I also have left over from when it wasn't so legal a walrus mammoth tusk. Walrus tusk.
No mammoth.
Walrus.
Just walrus tusk.
But I've made a couple worlds, but I can't sell those. But we were able to give one to a Native American friend of ours.
Yes.
They can own walrus.
Yes.
As part of the Native American treaty business. So we gave her one, and she was very happy to get it. Happy to get it. So I've made my father's woodworker, and I think he had this tooth to make a stand for one of his customers. And he never did, and when he died and I got what was left over, I got this tusk. So I know it's at least 70 years old, so it's certainly old enough to classify as a
antique.
Antique. Antique. That's not the word they use.
But
it's a legal tusk.
Yes.
But I can't sell it, except to Native Americans, and I don't know that many Native American spinners. Just this one.
Yeah.
And we've also made some out of teeth. A woolly mammoth tooth we've made some of, and I have some Colombian mastodon teeth. Somebody down in Carolinas dug up some teeth from these and made cozies, glass cozies out of just a disc of it. The pattern is much different from a woolly mammoth and a mastodon. You can tell immediately which it came from if you see.
Is that also on the endangered list?
Yes, I'm sure it is.
Like they're just going to walk around one day. Joni is asking if you'd cover some of the shaft woods that are used and why.
Shaft woods.
Okay.
Well, most our beginning spindles come with shafts we can buy commercially. For the smaller ones, we use a birch shaft, and for the 3-inch one, we use Port Orford cedar arrow shafting.
We use that because we know it's straight.
Theoretically, arrows are straight. So when we buy arrow shafting, we have fairly high confidence that it's a straight shaft.
Yeah.
With the birch ones have an attrition rate.
Yeah.
We buy 100 shafts and throw away a quarter of them because they warp. So we save the parts that aren't stressed, but we replace it when it goes bad later. But then we have hardwood shafts, which we have to make from a plank because no one makes
we can't get them pre-made.
So
we do them ourselves.
We make our own shafting for the hardwood shafts of many flavors.
So what we use is we use a lot of Dalbergia, which is rosewood family woods like tulip wood, kingwood, Cochin rosewood, other rosewoods, because they basically either warp right away or they're straight. And so the ones that warp right away we don't bother with, but the ones that stay straight we use those. We try to use woods that are appealing to the eye. and that are complementary to the whorls that we pair them up with.
There's we use some ebonies.
We use some ebonies. We use some we use black and white ebony and some black ebony, African ebony. We use bubinga, which is a lovely sort of rosy brown color with sometimes little markings on it and has a nice inner glow to it. Also Chechen and Bocote, they look very similar. Those are African woods, I think. Bocote is an African wood. Chechen, I'm not so sure about. Is very fine. Bocote is very fine black striping on a sort of cafe au lait color background. And it's also probably a spalted wood, and the grain goes higgledy-piggledy everywhere, all over, and sometimes it's splotches and sometimes it's stripy, but it's always interesting, and that one's pretty good. Chechen is similar, but is more like brown on brown with a nice gold undertone and has a really beautiful glow to it, so I like using that. I also like using Purple Heart because I love purple, as everybody knows. We also use Red Heart, which is a deep red. Well, it can range from sort of a hot red, fire red, to a more burgundy color, but it's also quite beautiful. We also use that one and Purple Heart, Bocote, and a couple other things for whorls as well. So you could get a Bocote spindle with a Bocote shaft if you really like wiggly wood. Or you could get it with a walnut shaft if you just want something calmer and plainer and let the whorl be the feature.
And
Any
I'm
other
gonna stop the recording at the moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.